The week began, as most weeks did in a medieval household, not with any sense of urgency or excitement, but with the simple awareness that bread would be needed. There was no written schedule hanging on the wall, no clock to mark the hour, and no spoken announcement that the work must start. Instead, the knowledge settled gently into the mind, carried over from countless weeks before, shaped by habit rather than planning. Bread was eaten every day, in small pieces and large ones, at nearly every meal, and because of this, its preparation was never far from thought. On the first morning, the family rose slowly. Light crept through narrow openings in the walls, thin and pale, touching the rough wooden floor in uneven patches. The air was cool, and the house was quiet, except for the soft sounds of movement, feet shifting, a bench scraping faintly, a door opening and closing with a dull wooden sigh. No one spoke much. There was nothing new to say about bread. The work had been done this way for years, and likely by parents and grandparents before that. The grain, stored carefully from the last harvest, weighted in sacks or bins made of wood or thick cloth. It was not especially clean by modern standards. Bits of husk remained, and sometimes small stones or dust had to be picked out by hand. This was not considered unusual or frustrating. It was simply part of the task. One person knelt beside the container, running fingers slowly through the grain, lifting it, letting it fall back again, listening to the faint, dry sound it made as it shifted. The movement was repetitive and calming, almost thoughtless, and it could continue for a long time without pause. Measuring the grain did not require precise tools. The family used containers they trusted, bowls, cups, or scoops, whose sizes were known through experience rather than numbers. They filled one, then another, emptying the grain into a larger vessel that would eventually be carried outside or to another room. The process was slow, but there was no reason to hurry. The bread would not be eaten today. It was being prepared for the days ahead, and patience was built into every step. Once the grain had been gathered, it needed to be taken to the mill or ground at home, depending on the family's situation. For many, this meant a walk to the local mill, carrying the heavy load along familiar paths. The journey itself was uneventful. Footsteps pressed into dirt already marked by countless others, and the weight of the grain shifted against the body with each step. The walk allowed time for thinking, though the thoughts were rarely important. Often, they drifted without focus, returning again and again to the rhythm of walking and breathing. At the mill, waiting was unavoidable. Other families had arrived before, each with their own grain, each prepared to stand or sit quietly until their turn came. The sound of the millstone turning was constant and low, like a deep, unchanging hum. Grain was poured, ground, and collected again, but the process took time. The family did not watch closely. They had seen it too many times. Instead, they waited, shifting their weight, listening, and letting the minutes pass without marking them. If the grain was ground at home, the work was even slower. A hand mill or quern required steady effort, turning stone against stone, again and again. One person might begin, then another would take over when arms grew tired. The flour collected gradually, fine and pale, dusting the air and settling on hands and sleeves. The motion was repetitive and almost hypnotic. Turn, pause, turn again. Nothing changed quickly, and that was expected by the time the grinding was finished. The day had moved on without anyone noticing. Light shifted in the room, shadows lengthened, and the quiet continued. The flour was set aside, covered loosely, to keep it dry and safe. There was no celebration, no sense of accomplishment beyond the quiet satisfaction of having completed the first step. The week's bread had begun, but there was still much time before it would be baked, eaten, and slowly disappear. The family cleaned their hands in simple ways, brushing off flour or rinsing briefly with cold water. The tools were placed back where they belonged, ready to be used again. Nothing about this moment was special, and that was precisely why it fit so easily into daily life. The preparation of bread was not a single event, but a long series of small, unremarkable actions, each blending into the next. As evening approached, the house returned to stillness. The flour rested quietly, the grain sacks stood lighter than before, and the knowledge remained that more work would come tomorrow. For now, there was nothing left to do but wait, allowing the day to end as gently as it had begun. The second part of the week's preparation did not feel separate from the first. It followed naturally, without announcement, shaped more by the pace of the household than by any deliberate decision. The flour that had been ground earlier now rested quietly, and its presence alone suggested what would come next. There was no rush to begin. In medieval life, waiting was not an interruption to work. It was woven into it, the grinding of grain, when it had not all been completed at once, often continued in small sessions throughout the day. Someone would pass the hand mill, notice it sitting idle, and sit down beside it without comment. The stone was cool to the touch at first. Hands found the familiar grip, fingers settling into the worn places left by years of use. When the turning began again, it was slow and steady, producing the same dull, circular sound that filled the room without demanding attention. The body learned this movement well. Muscles worked without urgency, and the mind drifted. There was nothing to solve, nothing to decide. The grain fell between the stones, was crushed, and became flour. Over and over, the process repeated itself. Sometimes the grinder paused, not because the task was finished, but simply because it felt like time to stop. The mill waited patiently until someone returned. Children, if present, were sometimes given small tasks nearby. They might be asked to watch the flour pile grow or to brush stray grain back into a bowl. These jobs were not exciting, and that was intentional. Through boredom, they learned patience. Through repetition, they learned how long things took. No one tried to make the work entertaining. It was enough that it was useful. As the hours passed, the house remained quiet. Sounds were soft and predictable. The turning of stone, the faint scrape of wood, the occasional shuffle of feet. Outside, life continued in its own slow way. Animals moved, neighbors passed, wind touched the walls. None of it required attention. The family focused only loosely on the task at hand, allowing time to stretch without resistance. When enough flour had been collected, it was sifted, though not carefully by modern standards. A simple cloth or sieve separated the coarsest bits from the finer powder. This too took time. The cloth was shaken gently, then more firmly, then rested again. The motion was tiring but familiar. The hands grew pale with dust, and the air carried the faint smell of grain. At intervals, the family rested. Sitting on benches or stools, they waited, without doing much at all. Waiting was not considered wasted time. It was expected. Bread did not reward impatience. The pauses between actions were as much a part of preparation as the work itself. During these pauses, people might stare at the floor, at the wall, or at nothing in particular. Thoughts came and went slowly, without urgency. Eventually, the flour was gathered into a single container. It looked unremarkable, pale and soft, easily disturbed by movement. It represented many hours of quiet effort, but no one stopped to admire it. It was simply placed where it would remain dry and safe until the next step. A cloth was laid over it, not tied tightly, just enough to keep dust away. As daylight shifted again, the family adjusted without comment. The work slowed, not because it was finished, but because the body grew tired. Fatigue was not something to push through aggressively. It was a signal to pause. The millstone was left where it was. The bowls stayed on the table. Nothing needed to be cleared away completely. The house was a place of ongoing work, not sudden completion. Later, someone returned briefly to the flour, touching it lightly, checking its texture. This was done without measuring or testing in any formal way. Experience guided the hand. The flour felt right, or close enough. If it was not perfect, it would still become bread. Perfection was not required. Consistency was enough. As evening approached, attention shifted elsewhere. Meals were eaten, not elaborate ones, often including bread from the previous batch. There was no irony in eating old bread while preparing new. This cycle was so common that it barely registered. Bread replaced bread, week after week. Without ceremony, the flour remained untouched through the night. In the darkness, it waited. There was no concern that it might spoil quickly. The pace of life allowed for patience. The next steps, mixing, kneading, waiting, again, would come when the time felt right. For now, the work paused naturally, settling into stillness. By the end of this second phase, nothing dramatic had happened. No transformation was visible yet. Grain had become flour, but it still looked much the same as it always had. The importance of the work lay not in its appearance, but in its quiet reliability. The family slept knowing that the foundation of the week's bread was already in place, resting silently, just as they were. The next stage in the quiet progress toward bread arrived without ceremony. There was no fixed morning chosen for it, no signal that announced the moment had come. Someone simply noticed the flour resting where it had been left and understood, without speaking, that it was time to move forward. The preparation of bread followed feeling more than instruction, guided by habit formed through years of repetition rather than written knowledge. Water was brought into the house in a simple container, drawn earlier from a well or nearby source. It was cool and plain, untouched by any concern for temperature beyond what the hand could feel. No one tested it carefully. Experience had taught them that water was forgiving. If it was too cold, time would correct it. If it was slightly warm, nothing would be ruined. The bowl was set beside the flour, and both waited briefly, as if acknowledging one another. The mixing vessel was wide and sturdy, its surface worn smooth from countless uses. Flour was tipped into it slowly, not all at once, creating a pale mound that shifted softly as it settled. Fingers brushed the edges of the bowl to gather stray dust back toward the center. These movements were unhurried, careful only in the sense that they were familiar. No one rushed to finish. When the water was added, it was poured gradually, a thin stream at first, then slightly more as needed. The sound was soft, barely noticeable. The flour absorbed it unevenly, darkening in patches, forming clumps without protest. Hands entered the bowl soon after, fingers spreading and folding the mixture together. The texture changed slowly, resisting at first, then yielding. Kneading did not begin immediately. First came the slow combining, a gentle pressing and turning that allowed the flour to accept the water in its own time. The dough was sticky and awkward, clinging to skin and bowl alike. This was expected. There was no attempt to correct it quickly. Instead, hands paused, then continued, allowing the dough to settle between movements. The rhythm of mixing developed naturally. Press, fold, turn, press again. Each motion followed the last without thought. Muscles worked lightly, not yet strained. The bowl remained steady on the table, and the room stayed quiet. If someone passed nearby, they did so without comment. The sight of dough being mixed was too ordinary to mention. Occasionally, more flour was added, dusted lightly over the surface. This was done by sight and feel alone. The hands told the story better than the eyes. If the dough pulled too much, it was left alone for a moment. Resting was part of the process, just as movement was. Bread did not respond well to force. As the dough thickened, kneading became more deliberate. The motions grew firmer, though still slow. The dough was folded over itself again and again, pressed gently, then turned. This continued for a long time, measured not in minutes, but in the steady repetition of movement. No one counted. The body knew when enough had been done. During kneading, thoughts drifted easily. There was little to hold attention. The work allowed the mind to wander without consequence. Sometimes kneading paused simply because attention wandered too far. The dough waited. It did not spoil in moments. It accepted the pause without complaint. Eventually, the dough reached a point that felt familiar. It was smoother now, less sticky, more cooperative. The hands slowed, then stopped. The surface was not perfect, but it did not need to be. A rough ball was formed and set back into the bowl. A cloth was placed over it loosely, not sealed, just enough to keep it from drying. This marked the beginning of waiting once more. The dough was left to rest, to change quietly on its own. No one hovered nearby. The family returned to other small tasks, trusting time to do what hands could not. Fermentation, though not named or fully understood, was well known through experience. Dough left alone would rise, slowly and predictably. The room grew still again. The bowl sat undisturbed, the cloth lifting slightly as air moved beneath it. Nothing visible happened for a long while. This was expected. Bread required faith in slowness. The family did not check repeatedly. They knew it would take time. As the light shifted through the day, the dough continued its quiet work. By evening, it had changed just enough to be noticed. Someone lifted the cloth briefly, pressed a finger lightly into the surface, then replaced it. The sign was enough. The dough was doing what it should. This part of preparation ended not with action, but with restraint. Leaving the dough alone was as important as mixing it. The family understood this well. They stepped away, allowing the night to pass and the dough to rest in silence. preparing itself for what would come next. Once the dough had been mixed and set aside, the most important work became not touching it. This was understood without explanation. The bowl, covered lightly with cloth, remained where it had been placed, often on a table or a low shelf where it would not be disturbed. The family moved around it carefully, not out of reverence, but out of habit. The dough belonged to the rhythm of the house now, resting as naturally as anything else within its walls. Time passed without markers. There was no clock to tell how long the dough had been resting, and no need for one. The family measured readiness by feel, by memory, by the quiet signs that experience had taught them to notice. The hours stretched comfortably, filled with other small tasks that required little attention. Sweeping the floor, mending cloth, carrying water. None of these interrupted the waiting. The dough remained patient. Occasionally, someone passed close enough to notice the cloth lifting slightly where the dough had risen beneath it. This was observed without comment. The change was expected, and there was no need to hurry in response. Dough that was allowed to rise slowly was better. Even if it rose too much or too little, it would still become bread. The family trusted this process because it had proven itself week after week. As the room cooled or warmed with the changing day, the dough adjusted quietly. No effort was made to control the environment. Windows were opened or closed as needed for comfort, not for the dough. The bread adapted to the household, not the other way around. This acceptance of imperfection was part of medieval cooking. Exact conditions were neither possible nor necessary. During the long rest, the house took on a subdued stillness. Sounds softened. Even footsteps seemed quieter. The presence of the resting dough created a subtle awareness that something was in progress, though nothing visible was happening. This awareness did not create tension. Instead, it blended into the background of daily life. As unremarkable as the sound of wind against the walls, at some point, usually without announcing the reason, someone returned to the bowl. The cloth was lifted slowly, just enough to see the surface beneath. The dough had changed, expanded slightly, smoothed by time, marked faintly by the impression of the cloth. A finger pressed gently into it, leaving a small hollow that slowly filled in. This was enough. The cloth was replaced. There was no discussion about whether the dough was perfect. Perfection was not part of the goal. The aim was to create something reliable, something that would feed the family without complaint. Bread that rose unevenly or baked a little too dark was still bread. It was still eaten. This understanding removed pressure from the process, allowing it to remain calm and unhurried. As evening settled, the dough continued to rest. The family ate their meal, often with bread from the previous week. The contrast was rarely considered. Old bread and new preparation coexisted easily. Nothing was wasted, and nothing was rushed to replace what remained. Night arrived gradually. Lamps or candles were lit, casting soft, wavering light across the room. The bowl of dough sat quietly in this dimness, unchanged to the eye but active in its own slow way. No one stayed awake to watch it. Sleep came as it always did, and the dough was left alone in the dark. Through the night, the house cooled. The dough responded, slowing its movement. This did not cause concern. Slowness was welcome. Morning would come eventually, bringing the next step. Until then, There was nothing to do but allow time to continue its steady work. By the end of this long rest, the dough was ready in a way that could not be rushed or forced. It had been shaped by hours rather than hands. This quiet shaping was valued, even if it was not spoken about. The family trusted what they could not see, relying on patience rather than intervention. This part of the process ended without any visible conclusion. The dough remained in its bowl, unchanged in appearance from one moment to the next. Yet something important had happened during these hours of waiting. The foundation for the week's bread had settled into place, quietly and completely. Morning returned quietly, as it always did, bringing light without urgency. The house stirred slowly. No one rushed toward the bowl of dough, though its presence was known. The work of shaping would happen, but only when the moment felt ordinary enough to allow it. Bread did not demand attention the way urgent tasks did. It waited. When the bowl was finally uncovered, the dough revealed itself without drama. It had risen, though not perfectly. The surface was uneven in places, marked by faint impressions and soft folds. This was familiar. The dough was never smooth or symmetrical at this stage. Hands reached in gently, testing its softness with a light press. The resistance was mild, yielding without collapsing. The table was prepared in a simple way. A small scattering of flour was spread across the wood, brushed thinly with the palm of a hand. There was no attempt to cover the surface completely. Too much flour would dry the dough. Too little would cause it to stick. The balance was known by feel alone. The bowl was tilted, and the dough slid out slowly, pulling away from the sides with a quiet sound. Shaping began without instruction. The dough was divided into portions, roughly equal, though no effort was made to make them exact. Each piece was lifted, folded gently over itself, then turned and folded again. The movements were careful but unhurried. The dough responded slowly, stretching, then settling. Hands worked steadily, repeating the same motions. There was no counting of folds, no concern for uniformity. Each loaf was shaped according to how it felt in that moment. If one was slightly larger, it would bake longer. If another was flatter, it would bake faster. These differences were accepted without thought. Between shaping each piece, the hands rested briefly. The dough was allowed to relax before being handled again. This pause prevented tearing and resistance. It also allowed the shaper to breathe, to stand still for a moment, to let the process remain calm. Bread rewarded gentleness more than effort as the loaves took form. They were set aside on boards or cloths dusted lightly with flour. They did not touch one another. Each rested in its own small space, allowed to rise again in its own way. The room remained quiet, filled only with the soft sounds of movement and breath. The shaping did not take long, but it was not rushed either. The family understood that haste served no purpose here. Once shaped, the dough needed time again. This second rest was shorter, but just as important. The loaves were covered lightly, protected from drafts, and left alone. Attention drifted elsewhere. Other tasks resumed. The shaped dough was not watched closely. Checking it too often would not make it rise faster. The family trusted the familiar pattern. It had worked before. It would work again. As time passed, the loaves softened and expanded slightly. They did not double dramatically. The change was subtle, noticeable only to those who knew what to look for. A finger pressed gently into one loaf, leaving a mark that slowly faded. This was enough. By the end of this stage, the bread was nearly ready for baking. Yet nothing had been placed in the oven. That would come later. For now, the shaping was complete, and the dough rested quietly once more, prepared but unhurried. Chapter 1 ended this way, not with bread fully formed, but with it patiently waiting. The week's preparation had only just begun, and already much time had passed. This was expected. Bread was never a single act. It was a sequence of calm decisions and deliberate pauses, each one building toward a result that would feel almost ordinary when it finally arrived. The oven was not prepared quickly, nor was it prepared last. In a medieval household, the oven was a presence that required forethought, much like the bread itself. It did not warm instantly, and it did not forgive haste. Preparing it was an activity that unfolded slowly, beginning well before the bread was ready and ending only when the heat felt steady and familiar. The oven, often built of stone or thick clay, sat quietly most of the time. It was heavy and unmoving, part of the structure of the home or yard, rather than a tool that could be carried or adjusted easily. When the time came to use it, someone approached it with the same calm attention given to all other household tasks. There was no sense of ceremony, but there was care. Fuel was gathered first. Wood was chosen not for speed, but for reliability. Pieces that burned too fast were avoided. Those that smoked too much were set aside. The selected wood had been drying for some time, stacked and forgotten until needed. Carrying it to the oven took several trips, each unremarkable. The sound of wood being placed down echoed softly, then faded. Lighting the fire was not dramatic. A small flame was encouraged, fed gently, allowed to grow at its own pace. There was no effort to make the oven hot quickly. The family knew that slow heating produced better, more even warmth. The fire was watched without staring. It did not require constant adjustment. It only needed time. As the fire burned, the oven absorbed heat gradually. Stone darkened slightly, then returned to its usual color. The warmth spread inward, settling into the thick walls. This process could not be rushed. Attempts to do so often resulted in uneven heat, something the family had learned to avoid through experience rather than instruction. While the oven warmed, the shaped loaves rested nearby. They were not moved closer to the heat. The bread and the oven followed separate timelines that would eventually align. Until then, each was allowed to continue its quiet work independently from time to time. Someone checked the fire, adding a piece of wood or shifting what had already burned. These movements were slow and deliberate. There was no reason to stir the fire aggressively. A calm fire produced calm bread. The family understood this without needing to say it aloud. Waiting filled much of this stage. The oven warmed, the fire burned, and the house remained quiet. Other tasks were done in the meantime, none of them demanding full attention. The preparation of bread did not isolate the family from daily life. Instead, it blended into it, unfolding alongside everything else eventually. The fire reached a point where it was no longer needed. The flames were allowed to die down, leaving behind glowing embers. These were spread slightly, then left alone. The oven held its heat now. It no longer needed encouragement. Testing the oven did not involve instruments. A hand was held near the opening, not inside, just close enough to feel the warmth. The sensation was compared to memory. Too hot felt sharp. Too cool felt dull. The right heat felt steady, enveloping, familiar. When the heat was judged acceptable, the embers were removed or pushed aside. Ash was brushed away carefully, not thoroughly. A small amount remaining did no harm. The oven was ready, or close enough to ready that it would be by the time the bread was placed inside. This preparation did not end with a clear signal. There was no moment when someone declared the oven finished. It simply reached a state that felt correct. The family trusted this feeling, just as they trusted the dough to rise and the flour to become bread by the end of this stage. The oven stood warm and quiet, holding heat within its thick walls. The fire was gone, but its work remained. The bread rested nearby, shaped and waiting. Everything was in place, though nothing had yet been baked. With the oven warm and ready, attention shifted once more to the loaves resting on the table. They had been waiting patiently, shaped and quiet, and now they were prepared for the next gentle stage. Carrying them toward the heat required care, but not haste. Every movement was deliberate, measured, and unhurried. The loaves were lifted one at a time, hands sliding beneath each piece, feeling the soft texture without pressing too firmly. There was a rhythm to this motion, repeating for each loaf. No one counted the repetitions, and no one remarked upon the slight differences in size or shape. Each loaf was accepted as it was. Imperfection was not a concern. The path to the oven was usually short, but required mindfulness. The floor, made of packed earth or worn wooden planks, was uneven. Feet stepped cautiously to avoid tripping, to maintain the calm of the household, and to ensure that no loaf was dropped or jostled excessively. Every step was slow, deliberate, measured against the pace of the dough itself. Hands carried the bread steadily, allowing it to rest in motion. There was no need to hurry. Bread, like time, responded best to patience. Any sudden movement risked compressing or deforming the soft loaves. Each movement of arms, shoulders, and feet contributed to a quiet choreography that had been repeated countless times across the generations. Before placing the loaves inside the oven, they were sometimes brushed lightly with a thin layer of flour or dusted to remove excess from shaping. This was done gently, not for appearance, but to prevent sticking. The motion was repetitive, soft, almost hypnotic in its simplicity. Loaf after loaf received the same treatment, each action blending seamlessly into the next. The oven door, heavy and thick, was opened slowly. The warmth inside rolled outward, soft and steady, not scorching but enveloping. Hands adjusted the position of the loaves carefully, setting each on the stone floor of the oven or on a wooden peel, depending on the household's method. The loaves were spaced evenly, left room to expand. Nothing was rushed, nothing forced. Once inside, the loaves were not touched again. The oven itself would do the work now, transforming dough into bread in its own time. Closing the oven door was not dramatic. It was done gently. The latch moved slowly, and the warmth was contained, held steady by the thick walls. The household returned to its quiet routines, while the bread baked undisturbed. The act of carrying and placing the bread took only a few minutes, but it felt longer because of the attention given to each motion. This attentiveness was part of the practice, part of the rhythm of life that accompanied bread making. No step was hurried. No step was skipped. The slow pace was valued as much as the eventual result. Even after the loaves were placed in the oven, hands lingered nearby, adjusting embers or dusting surfaces lightly. Small gestures completed the scene, maintaining a sense of calm and order. There was no need for observation of the loaves themselves. Time and heat were sufficient. The house returned to a quiet stillness. The baking process was underway, though invisible. The family did not crowd the oven or check impatiently. The bread rose and browned at its own pace. The smell began to fill the air subtly, almost imperceptible at first, a slow signal that the loaves were transforming. Nothing about this moment demanded urgency. By the end of this stage, the bread had been carried and placed carefully. It was safe and warm, left alone to mature into the food that would sustain the household. The rhythm of daily life continued around it. Tasks not related to bread were resumed, small chores that required little energy or thought. The household moved slowly, in harmony with the quiet work of the oven. The loaves, now resting inside the warm stone oven, were left to transform in silence, and the household resumed its quiet rhythm, moving around the oven without disturbance, carrying out small, familiar tasks while the heat worked steadily and imperceptibly on the dough. Each loaf gradually expanding, the edges softening, the surface smoothing in ways that could barely be noticed by the eye, yet were essential to the final bread, and no one checked obsessively or measured precisely, because experience had taught that patience was more effective than attention, that the oven's steady warmth would do the work in its own time, and while the bread baked, the air of the room changed subtly, carrying the faint, comforting scent of slowly warming dough, a smell that drifted quietly through the kitchen and into nearby rooms, mixing with the dust of old floorboards and the faint temps of the clay oven itself, a reminder that progress was happening even when it could not be seen, that each hour spent waiting was as important as the movements that had come before. And so the family continued their ordinary activities, sweeping the floor, mending cloth, moving water, preparing simple meals for themselves, never rushing, never interrupting the process, knowing that bread required its own time, that the dough would rise, brown, and become sustaining nourishment exactly as it should if left undisturbed. And in this slow, steady waiting, there was comfort in the repetition and calm in the ordinary, a gentle rhythm that carried the household through the hours, until the bread would finally be ready to be removed from the oven. Each moment marked not by haste or excitement, but by a patient, quiet awareness that something as essential as bread was created not in a single instant, but in the slow accumulation of careful, unhurried effort, in the soft unfolding of time, and in the stillness that allowed the simple, ordinary transformation to occur unnoticed yet perfectly. And in that stillness, the household found a peculiar satisfaction, knowing that the loaves were becoming what they needed to be, and that all of this, though mundane, was enough to fill the day with purpose without requiring any urgency or spectacle. After what felt like a patient eternity, though in truth it was measured in hours, the bread had completed its slow transformation inside the warm stone oven, and hands approached once more with care, using wooden peels and soft flour-dusted mitts to lift the loaves gently from the heat, feeling their warmth through the wood and knowing instinctively and as they were set down on boards or racks to cool, the air in the room shifted subtly, carrying the fuller, richer scent of baked bread, a smell that mingled with the lingering warmth of the oven and the faint dust of flour from earlier work. And the loaves were left to settle quietly, expanding slightly as the heat dissipated, their crust forming gradually in a golden brown hue, not uniform but pleasing in its imperfection, while the family moved around them slowly, brushing crumbs, adjusting the cloths under the boards, and checking occasionally with a finger pressed lightly to ensure that the interior remained soft without being too warm to touch. And there was no rush to eat or store the bread, because it was understood that cooling properly would make it last longer. And while it cooled, the household returned to other small routines, perhaps sweeping, chopping vegetables, or carrying water. All ordinary movements that filled the time and allowed the loaves to rest undisturbed. And in this slow, quiet process, the rhythm of daily life merged seamlessly with the life of the bread, so that the act of baking was less about a moment of completion and more about the gentle unfolding of hours, the careful attention without hurry, the constant awareness of time passing in calm repetition, until finally the bread had reached a state ready to be stored or consumed, its existence a testament to patience, continuity, and the quiet, enduring work of the household that had begun long before the first grain was milled, a process that required nothing but steady hands, gentle motions, and the quiet patience that defined the slow art of medieval bread making. Once the loaves had cooled sufficiently, their transformation from soft, sticky dough to firm, golden brown bread complete yet unhurried, the family turned their attention to storing them properly, an act that was itself quiet, deliberate, and filled with small, almost imperceptible routines that had been repeated countless times over many weeks, months, and years. And though it might have seemed insignificant to an outsider, the process of moving the loaves from the cooling boards to their resting places was treated with the same patience and care that had been applied in every previous stage, because each loaf represented hours of waiting, kneading, shaping, and baking, and mishandling even slightly could compromise the careful labor invested. So each piece was lifted gently, hands steady and careful to avoid jostling or denting the crust, and placed into baskets, bins, or wooden boxes lined with cloth, sometimes with a light dusting of flour or straw to absorb excess moisture and prevent sticking. The containers arranged in cool corners or on shelves where air flowed slowly around them, never too warm, never too cold, maintaining the quiet balance needed to keep the bread fresh throughout the coming days. And as the loaves settled into their storage places, the household moved around them with soft steps, brushing crumbs, adjusting cloths, and tending to other minor chores, mending garments, fetching water, stacking firewood, or sweeping the floor, all while the bread rested, continuing its subtle changes, the crust firming further, the interior retaining just the right softness. And the aroma of fresh bread lingered faintly in the air, mingling with the warmth of the oven stones, now cooling, the faint tang of flour, and the ever-present earthy sense of the medieval house. And in these quiet hours, the family reflected, if only briefly, on the week ahead, knowing that these loaves would feed them, sustain them, and serve as the centerpiece of daily meals for the next several days. and there was no need for excitement or celebration, because the work itself had already been its own reward. The satisfaction found in continuity, rhythm, and the unhurried mastery of a familiar process. And so, as the day drew to a close and evening shadows lengthened across the floor, the household rested, confident that the bread was secure, that their patience had been rewarded with sustenance, and that the week would proceed as it always did, slowly, quietly, and predictably, a rhythm of life intertwined with the slow, careful art of preparing, baking, and storing bread, a process that connected every member of the family to the past and to one another through repeated, gentle acts, forming a small, ordinary, yet profoundly steady foundation for the days ahead, until the next week would arrive and the cycle would begin once more. The new week began quietly, much like the last, with no sudden urgency, no announcement, only the gentle understanding that bread would again be needed for the household. And the process began with the simple, familiar act of examining the remaining supplies, the sacks of grain resting patiently in their corners, dust settling lightly on the woven cloths that covered them, the family moving slowly around the room, touching the containers, feeling the texture of the grain through the fabric, noting how much remained, and planning silently in their minds how much would be required to ensure that the coming days were covered. While outside, light moved gradually across the rough walls and through narrow windows, and the quiet sounds of the morning, the scrape of a bench, the soft shuffle of feet, the gentle opening of a door set, the rhythm for the household, allowing the body and mind to adjust to the day's pace, while one person gathered a small bowl or scoop and began measuring grain with hands that knew the weight and feel without counting, pouring it slowly into a larger container to prepare it for grinding. And as each handful fell, there was a faint sound of dry husk and a subtle shift of dust, a reminder that this work, though repetitive and mundane, was essential, that each motion built on the hours and days before, and that the household's continuity depended on these unremarkable, patient acts. And when enough grain had been measured, someone lifted it carefully and carried it to the mill, either walking the familiar path to the local stone mill or settling in beside a hand quern at home. The motion deliberate, the pace unhurried, each step, each turn of the millstone, a part of a slow, soothing rhythm, while other members of the family continued smaller tasks around the house, sweeping, mending, or tending to the fire, all the while allowing time to stretch and flow naturally. And when the grinding began, hands turned slowly, again and again, releasing fine flour that settled gently in the air, dusting the table and the fingers. And even as the sound of stone against stone filled the room with its low, constant hum, the mind drifted freely, noticing nothing, thinking little, simply allowing the monotony to carry the day forward. And by the time the flour was ready, carefully sifted and placed aside, a subtle sense of calm and satisfaction had settled over the household, a quiet assurance that the week's work was beginning as it always did, with patience, repetition, and the gentle unfolding of time, each small act forming the foundation of sustenance. And though nothing appeared dramatic or remarkable, the rhythm of these motions, the slow measuring, the turning of the mill, the quiet observation created a continuity that defined the household, anchoring each member in the ordinary, unhurried life of bread making, so that by the end of the morning, when the flour rested in its container and the mill was silent, there was already a feeling of quiet accomplishment, an understanding that the week's preparation had begun properly, and that in the slow, repetitive, and almost hypnotic motions of daily labor, the household had once again aligned itself with the gentle, unchanging cycle of sustenance and survival. With the measured grain ready, the next stage unfolded naturally, almost imperceptibly, as the family settled beside the hand mill or prepared to transport the grain to the stone mill. The quiet anticipation of work filling the room with a gentle sense of purpose, not urgency, and the hands that would turn the millstones moved deliberately, feeling the familiar grooves, pressing slowly and steadily. The circular motion repeated again and again in an unhurried rhythm that required attention yet allowed the mind to drift, while the soft, dry sound of husk being crushed into fine flour created a steady, hypnotic hum that blended with the occasional scrape of a wooden stool, the shifting of a foot, or the faint rustle of cloth as the household went about its other tasks in parallel. And as the flour accumulated, pale and soft, in the receiving container, there was a sense of quiet satisfaction in the gradual result, knowing that hours of repetitive effort were building the foundation for the week's bread, while children or other family members might assist with small, equally slow tasks, such as brushing stray grains back into the bowl or lightly shaking a sieve. All movements measured and gentle, contributing to the rhythm without interrupting it. And as the flour was sifted, separating coarse bits from fine powder, the hands moved in careful, circular motions, pausing now and then to rest, feeling the texture, adding a small sprinkling of extra grain when needed, repeating the motions until the substance felt just right, neither too heavy nor too light. Deliberate process, time seemed to stretch, each moment extended by the repetition and monotony, the quiet work filling the house with a calm that had no urgency, yet a sense of steady progress. And when the grinding and sifting were finally complete, the flour rested in a clean, covered container, pale and soft, waiting patiently for the next stage, while the household returned to other minor duties, sweeping, tending the fire, fetching water, each member moving in the same measured, unhurried way, their motions synchronized with the rhythm of flour being ground and sifted, the air lightly dusted with its pale particles, the room filled with the subtle aroma of grain, a faint, familiar scent that carried the quiet reassurance that the week's bread preparation was proceeding as it always had, methodically, patiently, and without rush, and that this repetition, this gentle, hypnotic cadence of labor, was itself a comfort, a way to mark the passage of time in harmony with the slow, enduring needs of life, sustaining the household and embedding each member in the enduring, unremarkable, yet profoundly steady rhythm of medieval bread-making. Once the flour had been ground and sifted to the familiar consistency, the family began the next step with the same quiet care that had marked every stage before, gathering a simple wooden bowl and pouring in the pale, soft powder, gradually feeling its texture, observing its weight, and then slowly adding water drawn from the well, cool and unhurried, not measured with precision but judged by touch and experience. A thin stream flowing into the flour, while fingers moved gently to bring the two together, pressing and folding without haste, the dough forming slowly, sticking slightly to the hands at first, then yielding gradually to each motion, while other members of the household continued small tasks nearby, sweeping, mending, or tending the fire. The rhythmic motions of kneading and mixing, filling the room with quiet, repetitive sounds, the soft pat of water against flour, the occasional scrape of a wooden bowl, the whisper of hands folding, pressing, and turning, creating a meditative rhythm that allowed the mind to drift as the dough responded patiently to each gentle motion, occasionally requiring more water or a light sprinkling of flour. Each adjustment made slowly, deliberately, without rush, the body moving in the same careful cadence that had guided every previous stage. And as the dough thickened, hands pressed and folded repeatedly, stopping intermittently to rest and feel the change in texture. The sticky mass gradually becoming smooth, pliable, and ready for the next phase. A transformation that occurred in tandem with the steady passage of hours, unnoticed by anyone but felt in the rhythm of labor itself. And when the dough reached the familiar consistency, it was gathered into a loose ball, placed back in the bowl, and covered with a cloth, not tightly, just enough to protect it while it rested, allowing the slow process of fermentation and preparation to continue. While the household resumed its quiet routines, the soft scent of flour and water lingering in the air, the room bathed in gentle light filtering through narrow windows, each moment extended by the repetition and stillness, and the family, moving calmly through their daily chores, understood without speaking that the careful, unhurried mixing of flour and water was both necessary and ordinary, a fundamental act that, repeated week after week, connected them to past generations and ensured that the bread, when finally baked, would sustain them in the slow, steady rhythm of medieval life. After the flour and water had been gently combined and allowed to rest briefly, the dough was ready for kneading, a process that demanded patience, rhythm, and steady hands, and the family approached it without urgency, placing the soft mass on a lightly floured wooden surface, pressing, folding, and stretching it slowly, fingers moving deliberately over the pliant texture, pressing down with enough force to reshape it, but never hurriedly, feeling its resistance and adjusting accordingly, turning it, folding it over itself again and again in a repetitive cadence that stretched over minutes and hours alike. The quiet motion accompanied by the soft scraping of hands against wood, the faint sigh of cloth or apron brushing against the table, and the occasional small noises of the household continuing their mundane tasks in parallel, sweeping, fetching water, tending fire, mending clothing, each sound blending into a gentle, almost hypnotic rhythm that marked the passage of time more than any clock ever could. And as the kneading continued, the dough gradually changed, becoming smoother, more cohesive, yielding more readily under gentle pressure, while the hands occasionally paused to rest, lightly dusting the surface with flour to prevent sticking. And in these moments of pause, the mind wandered, thoughts drifting like the slow movement of dust motes in the soft morning light that filtered through narrow windows, a calm awareness that the dough would respond in its own time, that patience was as essential as skill, and each fold, press, and turn contributed to the quiet transformation, building the structure and texture that would allow the bread to rise properly and hold together during baking. And there was no need to rush because haste would compromise the process. So the kneading continued in this gentle, deliberate rhythm, stretching out minutes into a meditative, almost timeless sequence, until finally the dough had reached the familiar stage where it felt pliable, resilient, and ready to rest again, a state achieved only through patient repetition, soft hands, and quiet attention, after which it was gathered back into a smooth, loose ball placed in a lightly floured bowl, covered gently with cloth, and left alone to continue its slow, invisible work, rising gradually while the household moved calmly around it, the rhythm of daily chores continuing alongside the quiet miracle of bread slowly preparing itself, a rhythm repeated over generations, ordinary yet essential, grounding the family in the unhurried, methodical life of medieval bread-making. Once the dough had been kneaded to the familiar, pliable consistency, it was returned gently to a clean, lightly floured wooden or clay bowl, the hands brushing lightly over its surface to prevent sticking, and it was covered with a soft cloth, not tied tightly, merely draped enough to protect it from drafts and dust while allowing it to breathe, resting quietly as the household continued its slow, ordinary routines around it, the rhythm of daily life unfolding in parallel with the dough's gradual transformation, sweeping, mending, fetching water, adjusting the fire, preparing small meals, all mundane tasks carried out without haste or ceremony, while the dough rested and began its final rise in silence, a subtle swelling that could be measured only by touch or the faint shifting of the cloth above it. And this period of waiting, often stretching for hours, required patience as much as skill, for checking too often or pressing too firmly would disturb the delicate process of fermentation. And so the family moved through the day with calm attention, the quiet repetition of chores blending seamlessly into the soft ambience of the kitchen, dust motes drifting in the sunlight filtering through narrow windows, faint smells of flour and warmth in the air, the slow rise of the dough, a quiet companion to the household, growing steadily, almost imperceptibly, yet undeniably. And as the hours passed, the dough expanded and developed the subtle elasticity and smoothness that would allow it to bake evenly, the cloth occasionally rising gently as if the bread were breathing, a faint sigh in the stillness, while the family continued their work around it, acknowledging its progress without words, trusting in the steady, ordinary unfolding of time, the repetition and rhythm of small movements, and the invisible magic of patient hands and quiet observation, until finally the dough had reached the stage where it was ready to be shaped for baking, resilient and soft, holding the memory of every previous stage. And in this slow, meditative process, the household found a comforting, almost hypnotic calm, the ordinary acts of daily life harmonizing with the quiet miracle of bread rising, a process repeated week after week, grounding the family in the enduring, patient rhythm of medieval domestic life, and marking yet another, small but essential achievement in the preparation of sustenance that would carry them through the coming days. As the week progressed and the dough rested patiently, attention turned to the hearth, the place where the final transformation of bread would occur, and preparing it required care, timing, and a steady hand. For a hearth was not simply a source of heat, but the center of household life, built from stone or clay, sometimes lined with bricks, its structure familiar from countless previous mornings and evenings. And before baking could begin, The fire had to be tended deliberately, wood selected with attention to dryness, size, and density, ensuring that it would burn evenly and steadily, neither too fast nor too smoky, while the household moved quietly around it, performing small, familiar tasks, sweeping the floor, brushing stray flour from tables, stacking additional wood nearby, fetching water in preparation for the day's chores, all movements blending into a gentle rhythm that echoed the steady passage of hours. And when the fire was finally lit, it was encouraged to grow slowly, sparks rising and dying down in soft flickers. Flames licking the edges of the hearth but never rushed, the warmth spreading gradually into the thick stones, the air carrying a comforting scent of burning wood mixed with the faint tang of flour and dust, a combination that had become synonymous with domestic labor and the slow unfolding of bread making. And as the embers glowed steadily, hands adjusted logs carefully, turning them only as necessary, removing excess ash, ensuring that the heat built up gradually without scorching or unevenness, while the dough, now nearly ready from its final rise, awaited the perfect moment, its soft, elastic surface barely moving under the cloth that covered it, and the household, moving in calm coordination, understood intuitively that patience was the essential ingredient, that the hearth's warmth had to be steady and consistent for the loaves to bake evenly, and no one hurried, for the rhythm of fire and dough, of wood and stone, demanded a careful, deliberate pace, a quiet observation, and a respect for time unfolding naturally. And as the hearth continued to heat, the familiar, muted sounds of a medieval home to scrape of a broom, the soft shuffle of feet, the faint clink of tools blended into a meditative ambience, filling the space with the ordinary, persistent cadence of domestic life, preparing the household and the bread itself for the crucial act of baking, the culmination of patient effort, repetition, and quiet, steady work that had begun days before, a slow, hypnotic, unhurried prelude to sustenance. Once the hearth had reached the steady, even warmth required for baking, the family approached the final stage with gentle care, lifting each rested loaf from its bowl or basket and carrying it slowly toward the glowing embers, hands steady and deliberate to avoid denting or compressing the soft, pliable dough. And though the path was usually short, each step was measured, mindful of uneven floorboards or stray objects that could disrupt the rhythm, while the household continued quiet routines around the kitchen, sweeping, mending, tending the fire, all movements performed without haste, blending seamlessly into the meditative ambience of bread making. And as each loaf reached the hearth, it was placed carefully upon a wooden peel or directly onto the prepared stone surface, positioned with deliberate spacing to allow room for expansion, the slight warmth radiating from the embers meeting the cool dough in a quiet interaction that was almost imperceptible yet essential, and fingers brushed lightly over the surface to smooth or adjust it, ensuring that the loaves sat evenly and would bake consistently, while the soft flicker of the flames and the gentle crackle of the embers filled the room with a soothing, repetitive sound that mirrored the slow, patient rhythm of the household. And when all the loaves were finally arranged within the hearth, the oven door or hearth cover was closed carefully, not slammed, allowing the heat to remain steady and uniform. The warmth contained within its thick stone walls. And the family stepped back, moving gently around the kitchen, brushing flour from hands and surfaces, adjusting cloths or boards, tending to smaller chores, all while the dough began its quiet transformation into bread, rising, firming, and browning in a process that could not be hurried. Each minute stretching gently, filled with the steady, meditative awareness that bread-making demanded patience, repetition, and care. A continuation of the slow rhythm that had guided the family from mixing flour and water days before, through kneading, resting, shaping, and now into the silent, warm, glowing hearth, where ordinary time, ordinary effort, and ordinary life merged into the extraordinary, almost imperceptible miracle of bread slowly becoming sustenance. With the loaves now resting within the warm hearth, the household moved back to its quiet routines, observing without intervening, for the process of baking required patience, steady heat, and time, and as the minutes stretched into hours, subtle changes began to appear on the surface of the dough, a gentle swelling here, a faint darkening there. Each shift barely perceptible, yet profoundly important. And the family, familiar with these signs, moved silently around the kitchen, tending to small tasks, sweeping, mending, fetching water, or stoking the fire just enough to maintain steady warmth, while avoiding any sudden movements that might disturb the quiet ambience of the room. And in the soft, muted light filtering through narrow windows, the smell of baking bread began to waft gently, mingling with the lingering sense of flour, dust, and warm stone, creating a comforting atmosphere that was at once ordinary and subtly enchanting, as though time itself slowed to match the rhythm of the hearth and the rising loaves, and hands occasionally brushed flour or adjusted embers at a distance, never reaching for the bread prematurely, knowing that the transformation could not be hurried, that the heat, the stone, and the dough had their own silent conversation, unfolding with meticulous, invisible precision. And as the crust slowly formed, golden brown and firming unevenly in places, the interior softened, filling the loaves with the structure and resilience that would allow them to last through the week, while the family, absorbed in the repetitive, quiet tasks of daily life, felt the meditative calm of this patient observation, the hypnotic cadence of waiting, and the satisfaction of knowing that, though nothing about the scene was dramatic, every minute contributed to a slow, deliberate, and enduring rhythm of domestic work, linking the hands and the hearth, the past and present, and culminating in a quiet, almost imperceptible miracle as raw dough was transformed by steady heat, patient attention, and the ordinary, unhurried passage of time into the bread that would sustain the household in the days to come. A rhythm repeated countless times before and destined to repeat again, a testament to patience, continuity, and the gentle, enduring flow of medieval life. After hours of patient baking, the loaves had reached the stage where the crust was firm, golden brown, and slightly uneven in places, and the family approached the hearth carefully, using wooden peels and lightly floured hands to lift each loaf with deliberate steadiness, avoiding sudden movements or pressure that might compromise their shape or texture. And as each piece was carried from the hearth to the cooling boards or baskets, the gentle aroma of baked bread filled the room fully, mingling with the lingering warmth of the oven, the faint dust of flour, and the soft scent of the wooden surfaces, creating an atmosphere both ordinary and comforting, while the family continued their quiet routines around the kitchen, sweeping crumbs, brushing flour from surfaces, adjusting cloths beneath the boards, and attending to small chores that required minimal attention. And as the loaves rested, they were inspected not for perfection, but for readiness, the hands pressing lightly on the crust to gauge firmness, observing the subtle color variations, noting the soft resilience beneath the golden surface, and occasionally slicing a small piece to confirm that the interior was baked through yet tender. All actions carried out with calm attention, slow and deliberate, in harmony with the rhythm that had guided the entire process from mixing and kneading to resting and baking. And while no words were exchanged, the household shared a quiet understanding, a sense of satisfaction in the steady, patient labor that had brought the bread to this point. And even as they carried on with other small domestic tasks, the loaves sat cooling, their presence a tangible result of hours of unhurried effort, each one a testament to the careful, repetitive, and enduring work that defined medieval bread making. The subtle, hypnotic cadence of lifting, placing, observing, and resting echoing the same rhythm that had guided the family through the previous stages, reminding them that patience, quiet attention, and consistency were as essential as the flour, water, and fire, and that in these ordinary, slow, almost imperceptible acts, sustenance was created, household life was sustained, and the gentle, enduring patterns of medieval domesticity were preserved. Once the loaves had cooled sufficiently, firm yet retaining a soft, resilient interior, the family turned their attention to storing them carefully for the coming week, lifting each piece gently and placing it into baskets, bins, or wooden boxes lined with cloth or straw, the containers arranged in cool, dry corners or on shelves where air circulated slowly, never too warm and never too cold, ensuring that the bread would remain fresh for days to come, while the household moved quietly around them, brushing crumbs, adjusting cloths, and attending to minor chores like sweeping the floor, fetching water, or tending to the fire. All actions performed without haste, blending seamlessly into the calm, meditative rhythm that had defined every stage of the bread-making process. And as each loaf settled into its resting place, the air remained filled with the comforting scent of freshly baked bread, mingling with the lingering aroma of flour and wood smoke, a subtle, grounding reminder of the ordinary yet essential labor that sustained the household. And in these quiet moments, there was a sense of completion, not in drama or fanfare, but in the steady, patient fulfillment of repeated, meticulous effort. The knowledge that the week's sustenance had been secured through the gentle, unhurried practices passed down through generations, and that each loaf, shaped, baked, and stored with care, carried with it the rhythm of domestic life, the meditative cadence of hands and hearth, and the quiet satisfaction of work done well, while the family continued with small tasks around the home, allowing time and patience to ensure that the bread remained intact, a tangible result of the slow, deliberate, and continuous effort that defined medieval daily existence, reinforcing the understanding that sustenance, comfort, and order were achieved not through haste or spectacle, but through repetition, care and the steady, enduring passage of ordinary hours, until finally, with the bread safely stored, the household could rest briefly, confident in the quiet success of their labor, and prepared to continue the cycle anew the following week. With the bread safely stored and the hearth cooled from its long labor, the household resumed the familiar, unhurried rhythm of daily life, each member moving deliberately through small, ordinary tasks that had become part of the cadence of existence, sweeping the floor, tending the fire, mending clothes, fetching water, preparing simple meals, all while the knowledge of the week's bread rested quietly in baskets and wooden boxes nearby, a steady, reassuring presence that allowed each action to be performed without rush or concern. And though the bread itself remained untouched for the moment, its existence shaped the household's routine, setting a tempo for the day that was calm, predictable, and measured, with hands moving slowly, breaths steady, and eyes observing only what required attention. The faint aroma of flour and the lingering warmth of the hearth mingling subtly with the smells of cooking, dust, and wood, creating an atmosphere that was simultaneously ordinary and deeply comforting. And as the family worked, they were mindful of the bread's role, not through explicit thought, but through the quiet understanding that sustenance was secured, that their efforts over the past days had produced a tangible, sustaining result, and that their routines could continue in a measured, deliberate fashion, aligned with the natural rhythms of light, warmth, and labor, while the loaves themselves sat silently in their containers, waiting patiently to be consumed, their golden brown crusts and soft interiors reflecting the careful attention, repetition, and patience that had gone into their creation. And in this way, the household's life revolved gently around the presence of bread, guiding motions, shaping time, and reinforcing the enduring, meditative rhythm of domestic activity, a rhythm that was slow, steady, almost hypnotic, and profoundly ordinary, yet essential, binding together hands, hearth, flour, and grain in a continuity that marked not only the passage of days, but the quiet, reliable heartbeat of medieval family life, where patience, routine, and repetition were as nourishing as the bread itself. As the day progressed, the household began to incorporate the freshly baked bread into their meals, a process performed with deliberate care and without haste, for each loaf was valuable, its texture and flavor the result of days of patient labor, and it was sliced carefully, using a wooden knife or a simple blade, each cut slow and precise, ensuring that the interior remained soft while the crust held firm, and the bread was then served alongside pottage, cheese, or other simple fare, filling bowls and plates in modest portions, while the family ate quietly, chewing slowly, savoring the warmth and subtle aroma. And though the meals themselves were unremarkable in appearance or speed, there was a meditative quality to the routine, the act of eating intertwined with the rhythm of preparation, kneading, baking, and storing, each bite a reminder of the time, patience, and care that had gone into its creation. And while the household moved through the day, returning to chores or tending fires, additional slices of bread were retrieved as needed, the containers opening and closing gently, the cloths and straw maintaining freshness, each loaf lasting several days if handled properly. and the presence of bread at every meal shaped not only the pace of eating but the structure of the day itself, encouraging measured bites, slow conversation, and the calm attention that characterized every task in the home. The soft aroma of crust and crumb mingling with the faint smells of cooking, dust, and wood, reinforcing the sense of continuity, security, and comfort, while children, adults, and the elderly alike internalized the gentle rhythm of sustenance and domestic life, learning to respect the slow, patient effort required for each loaf, and to understand that the ordinary, repetitive tasks surrounding bread, from slicing to serving, from storing to consuming, formed an enduring, almost hypnotic pattern, a quiet, meditative cadence that grounded the family, nurtured both body and mind, and connected them intimately to the slow, persistent rhythm of medieval life, where patience, repetition, and careful attention to small tasks were as essential as the food itself, and where every loaf told a story of time unfolding gently and predictably, marking the passage of days in a household attuned to the quiet, sustaining power of bread. By the middle of the week, the household returned to the stored bread to ensure that it remained in good condition, lifting baskets or boxes carefully, brushing off any crumbs, adjusting cloths, and occasionally rotating loaves to maintain even exposure to air. Each movement deliberate and unhurried, for haste could damage the crust or compress the soft interior. And as hands moved gently over the golden brown surfaces, the familiar textures and slight warmth from the day's ambient heat were noted, providing reassurance that the labor invested earlier had been successful. While other tasks in the kitchen continued, quietly sweeping, tending the fire, preparing simple meals, washing utensils, each member performing their duties slowly, their motions synchronized with the steady, meditative rhythm of the household. And when it became necessary to slice additional bread for meals, the action was performed with care, ensuring consistent portions, preserving the remainder, and reinforcing the lesson that patience and attention were as essential as the flour, water, and fire. And throughout this midweek check, the air remained filled with the subtle scent of bread, mingling with dust, wood smoke, and the faint aroma of cooking, creating a calm, familiar atmosphere that reminded all present of the continuity and reliability of their routines. And as loaves were handled, set aside, or moved gently, the family observed without urgency, noting the resilience of the crust, the softness of the interior, and the overall readiness of the bread to sustain them through the coming days. While the rhythm of domestic life continued uninterrupted, the quiet repetition of ordinary tasks creating a hypnotic cadence, a gentle meditation that reinforced the lessons of patience, diligence, and quiet attention to detail. And through these simple, repeated actions, checking, rotating, slicing, storing, the household maintained not only the physical bread, but also the intangible sense of order, calm, and continuity, understanding that the slow, deliberate care of each loaf was mirrored in the careful, unhurried movements that defined their lives, tying sustenance, rhythm, and domestic harmony into a continuous, almost imperceptible flow of medieval existence. As evening approached, the household prepared for the final meals of the day, bringing out the remaining bread with care, slicing each loaf slowly and deliberately to preserve the soft interior while keeping the crust intact. and placing the pieces on wooden plates or alongside bowls of pottage, cheese, or small servings of preserved vegetables, while the family ate in quiet, unhurried fashion, chewing carefully, savoring the subtle warmth and aroma of the bread. The routine of the evening meal almost meditative in its simplicity, and as each person finished their portion, the remaining slices were gently returned to their containers or covered with cloth, ensuring they would remain fresh through the night and into the following day. While the air of the kitchen carried a comforting mixture of scents, the faint temps of freshly baked crust, the lingering dust of flour, the soft smoke of the dying hearth embers, all blending into a calm, soothing atmosphere that reinforced the rhythm of the household. And though the meals were ordinary and unremarkable to an outsider, each bite, each motion, each placement of bread was part of a slow, continuous cadence that marked the passage of time, reflected the patience of the family, and honored the labor that had gone into every stage of preparation, from milling and mixing to kneading, resting, baking, and finally storing. And as evening tasks concluded sweeping, tidying, adjusting cloths, checking remaining loaves, the household settled into a gentle quiet, aware that sustenance had been secured, that each loaf had been treated with care, and that the rhythm of medieval life, measured, repetitive, and unhurried, continued to govern the pace of days and nights alike. While the bread, now safely stored for the night, remained both a physical and symbolic reminder of the patient, deliberate effort required to nourish a family, connecting each member to the cycle of preparation, the calm continuity of routine, and the enduring, gentle cadence of domestic life that was both ordinary and essential, a hypnotic, almost meditative pattern that echoed through the quiet hours until the household rested fully, ready to begin the cycle again the following morning. As the week drew to a close and the final loaves were counted, stored, or consumed, the household paused in quiet reflection on the slow, deliberate rhythm that had governed the preparation and use of bread. And though no formal ceremony marked the completion of the cycle, there was a shared awareness that the careful, patient work, measuring grain, grinding, mixing, kneading, resting, baking, slicing, and consuming had sustained the family, provided nourishment, and preserved continuity in the unhurried flow of daily life, while the air of the kitchen carried the soft, lingering sense of flour, warm crust, and wood smoke, a subtle reminder of the ordinary yet profound processes that underpinned their existence. And as each member moved through the quiet tasks of tidying, adjusting cloths over baskets, sweeping, and preparing the hearth for the next week, there was a meditative quality to their motions, a sense of calm satisfaction in knowing that patience, repetition, and steady hands had produced tangible, sustaining results, and the bread, now resting in boxes, baskets, or partially consumed, embodied not just physical nourishment but also the rhythm and order of the household, the invisible threads that connected one task to the next, one day to the next, and one generation to another. While outside, light shifted slowly across the walls, marking the passage of time as it had every week before, and the household moved deliberately through the ordinary, repetitive patterns of daily life, finding comfort in continuity, reassurance in careful attention, and a subtle, hypnotic calm in the quiet repetition of work that might appear mundane but was essential for survival. And in these slow, steady and unremarkable acts stretching, pressing, slicing, storing. Observing the family maintained not only their sustenance, but their sense of harmony, patience, and continuity, a gentle meditation on ordinary life that repeated week after week, a rhythm quietly anchored by the central, enduring presence of bread, whose making and keeping defined the household, disciplined time, and instilled a sense of calm persistence that flowed imperceptibly through every corner of medieval domestic life.